you remember the good old days, when young America was still in a haze? She was strong, proud, and led by one. The man of the hour was none but Washington. The hero, the celebrity, the idol of many. His farewell speech has warnings aplenty. But listen close, for did we take heed? Or were we overcome by strength and by greed? At the time, America would have sold its soul just to keep Washington in his role. But George understood the power of power. Hadn't they just fought this past hour to escape the government that oppressed them so? Why should they want another king, though? Washington resigned against the wishes of others, everyone, including sisters, mothers, and brothers. 2 terms was enough for the military man, who, it turned out, had set the plan. Jefferson, Adams, all did withdraw, but only after Roosevelt was it law. It seems Washington knew all along. Taking advantage of power is simply wrong.
I should now apprise you of the resolution I have formed to decline being considered among the number of those out of whom a choice is to be made. I rejoice that the state of your concerns, external as well as internal, no longer renders the pursuit of inclination incompatible with the sentiment of duty or propriety, and am persuaded, whatever partiality may be retained for my services, that in the present circumstances of our country you will not disapprove my determination to retire.
Next we shall look at some great sort of irony. If only Washington could see the patrimony. He warned us against foreign affairs. Europe and countries are none of our cares. We should avoid wars, alliances, and other ties. It seems Washington thought these to be unwise. He knew the danger, intrigue, and temptation, but did that stop the actions of this nation?
In the execution of such a plan, nothing is more essential than that permanent, inveterate antipathies against particular nations and passionate attachments for others should be excluded, and that in place of them just and amicable feelings toward all should be cultivated. The nation which indulges towards another a habitual hatred or a habitual fondness is in some degree a slave. It is a slave to its animosity or to its affection, either of which is sufficient to lead it astray from its duty and its interest. So, likewise, a passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. Sympathy for the favorite nation, facilitating the illusion of an imaginary common interest in cases where no real common interest exists, and infusing into one the enmities of the other, betrays the former into a participation in the quarrels and wars of the latter, without adequate inducement or justification. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world.
When Washington was president, the Union was strong. It seemed the colonies would be together lifelong. But then George said something to the contrary. At the time, the colonists may have been unwary. Washington warned against sectionalism. Loyalty to a certain region was an absurdism. One must be loyal to the entire nation, not just one single fixation. Perhaps George knew that one day the future of our nation could defray. The greatest war in our country's story would bring to life Washington's worry.
In contemplating the causes which may disturb our Union, it occurs as matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western, whence designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there is a real difference of local interests and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. You cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heart-burnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection.
Washington was a gentleman, we can be sure. So what would he say about today's moral manure? George pioneered morality and religion, saying in politics they mattered more than a smidgen. Actions speak louder than words, and we know Washington would find these scandals absurd.
Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, those firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them.
Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
Today, I want to briefly address a private matter. I have acted in a way that violates my obligations to my family and that violates my or any sense of right and wrong.
The last warning we shall take a look at may jar you or send you into a spat. Washington said no to political parties. A country without arguments would be more hardy. Did we completely ignore our first chief? Or did he read the fortune from the tea leaf? Washington was smart and knew the danger of divisive tactics and arguments that endanger the future of America and her government. Just look at where Congress went.
The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual.
Gentlemen, surely the point is that
Democrats have been spreading this far-left agenda for too long.
They're just plain wrong.
Washington had many warnings to give, but pretty much none would come to live. Our first president knew his country well, the traps and dangers he could foretell. America was simple at Washington's time, and now it seems we have done a crime. In his farewell speech, he advised the nation. Today, we can still look to that narration. We have engaged in many risky acts, but thanks to Washington, we knew the tax.